Out! Now!
I haven't broken any law, officer.
Did I stutter? Get out of the vehicle, now!
I'm complying. I'm only asking why.
Shut your mouth. People like you don't get to ask questions.
You don't have the right to do this.
I'll do whatever I want.
You're breaking the law, and you're being recorded.
That camera on my chest only records what I want it to record, sweetheart.
I do whatever I please out here. You see this badge? This badge means I am untouchable. And you?
You just stopped the wrong person, officer. You only don't know it yet.
The wrong person? I've stopped 1,000 like you. Every one of them says the exact same thing right before they go in the back of my car.
I'm giving you a chance. Call it into the station. Read my name into the system, just once. Because after this moment, there is no walking it back.
You're giving me orders? On my road?
Out here, I don't follow the law. I am the law.
Get out of the I am the law. You want to know what brought a person to that moment? Standing on the side of a road in the dark, listening to a stranger call her nothing? Then let me take you back, 10 minutes earlier, because here is the part that makes all of this so maddening. The man who caused every bit of it, from start to finish, was the cop. 10 minutes earlier, County Road 7, the stretch that runs between the town of Coleridge and the county line. Rush hour. 2 lanes, jammed solid. Cars crawling forward inch by inch under a copper-colored evening sky. Pine trees and red clay on both sides. Naomi Cole was in her own lane, at the right speed, both hands on the wheel at 10 and 2, exactly the way they teach you in every driving class on Earth. She had just come off a long day and was on her way to her mother's house. She had done nothing wrong. Hold on to that, because in a minute, someone is going to tell you the opposite. Then, from behind her, came a short blast of a horn. No emergency lights, no siren. Just a patrol car in a hurry, righting her bumper, flashing its high beams, demanding she pull aside and let it pass. Behind the wheel of that patrol car was Deputy Wade Garrett. He was not racing to save anyone. There was no emergency call on his radio. He was simply in a hurry, and he was used to this road making room for him. The trouble was, Naomi had nowhere to go. To her right was a row of cars sitting dead still. To her left, the oncoming lane was packed, headlights streaming past. So she did the thing the law and plain common sense told her to do. She held her lane, held her speed, and waited for a safe gap to let him by. But Wade Garrett was not a man who was used to waiting for anybody. He swung his patrol car into the oncoming lane. A car coming the other way had to stand on its brakes, horn screaming. Garrett gunned it, pulled up alongside her, cut in front, and then stamped on his own brakes, slamming to a stop crossways, blocking her path. Her tires ground on the gravel as she braked hard to keep from hitting the side of his cruiser. For those 3 seconds, the person who had just nearly caused a pileup, the person who had driven recklessly, crossed a double line, and broken the very law he wore a badge to enforce, was Garrett, not Naomi. He threw open his door, climbed out, and slammed it. He came around, slapped his palm flat on her hood, and started shouting. And here is the part that makes your blood run hot. He did not apologize for running her off the road. He shouted that she was the one at fault. "Are you blind?" he barked. "You see a police car behind you and you don't know to move? That's obstruction of an officer. You know that?" Naomi rolled her window down. Her voice was level. "You never turned on your emergency lights, officer. And there was nowhere safe on either side for me to pull over." "Now she's lecturing me on the law," he sneered. He bent down, leaned in close to her window, and looked at her face. And in that half-second, something shifted in his eyes. He was no longer looking at a driver. He was looking at the color of her skin. And a decision formed, not about the law, but about what kind of person he had already decided she was. Then his voice changed, and the rest of it you already heard. "Get out of the car. Shut your mouth. You're nothing. I am the law." She handed him a way out. She told him to call it in, to read her name into the system, just once. She did it twice. He threw both chances away. Now, here is what happened next. He grabbed her arm, spun her around, and shoved her down against the hood. Her cheek hit metal still warm from the engine. He kicked her feet apart, wider than he needed to, harder than he needed to. Then he wrenched both wrists behind her back.
"You stole this car, didn't you?" he said into her ear. "A woman like you doesn't drive a car like this. Not unless some pimp or some dealer is making the payments. It's registered in my name. I don't care what junkie gave birth to you." The cuffs snapped shut. They bit deep into her skin. Resisting arrest, obstruction, failure to comply. "I haven't resisted anything. You opened your mouth. That's resistance enough." He cranked the cuffs one notch tighter. A bolt of pain shot up both her arms. Naomi did not scream. She did not cry. Her jaw was clenched so hard it ached. But when she spoke, her voice came out flat as still water. "I'd like your badge number, officer." Garrett laughed, short and ugly. "Badge number, sweetheart? I am the badge number. Out here on this road, I decide who drives and who walks, who goes home and who goes to jail. And tonight, you go to jail." 3 cars slowed down to watch. All 3 of them kept driving. Not one stopped. Remember those 3 cars. We will come back to them at the end of this. And here is what Garrett did not know. The thing that turned everything he had just done into a mistake he would pay for the rest of his life. The person he had just handcuffed and shoved into the back of his cruiser was not one more nobody on his road. She was Major Naomi Cole, an officer in the United States Army, a lawyer. And in her file there was something that, if Garrett had known what it was, he would never have dared lay a single finger on her. He had just stopped the one person on that road who could end his entire career. And she was going to do it. Not with a single raised voice, not with a single tear, not with a loud lawsuit. She was going to do it with the exact recording that Garrett himself had been kind enough to make, on the camera strapped to his own chest. Think that's bad? Stay with me. Wait until you see what she does next. Because the woman in those handcuffs was playing an entirely different game. And the next time Wade Garrett saw her face, it would not be on the side of this road. It would be in a courtroom. At the station, Garrett walked her through booking like a hunter showing off a kill. In every room of the house. Fingerprints. He pressed each one of her fingers down into the ink, rough, like her hand itself was something dirty. A mugshot under fluorescent light, the kind that makes everyone look like a corpse. The whole performance, start to finish, and Garrett wanted to be sure the entire station got to watch. "Caught this one swerving all over Route 7, he announced, loud enough for the whole bullpen to hear. Real mouthy. You know how they get. One deputy at the front desk chuckled into his coffee. Another bent his head down over his paperwork and didn't look up. 2 more glanced at her, glanced at Garrett, then went back to work without a word. And here's the thing you need to understand, because it is the whole root of this story. It wasn't that they didn't see. They saw all of it. A woman standing straight-backed in cuffs who hadn't swerved, who hadn't resisted, being humiliated by their colleague in plain view. They saw it. They simply chose to say nothing, because to them, this was nothing new. This was just an ordinary Tuesday night in Colton County. Naomi stood in front of the booking camera, hands still cuffed behind her, spine straight, chin level, eyes forward into the lens. The flash went off. She did not blink. They held her for 4 hours in a cold holding cell that smelled of bleach. Then they let her go. No charges were ever formally filed. Nobody apologized. But the arrest was now on her record, permanent, and around both wrists were rings of bruising already turning a deep purple, almost black at the edges. She walked out of the station into the southern dark. There was no one to pick her up. Not one of her calls was answered, because it was past midnight. Only the sound of crickets, the far-off hum of traffic on Route 7, and the smell of red clay after a long, hot day. She stood under the yellow light of the parking lot for exactly 1 minute, perfectly still. And then, here is the moment I want you to burn into your memory, because this is when everything began to turn, even though not one soul inside that station knew it yet. Naomi Cole did not cry. She reached into the plastic bag they had returned her belongings in,
pulled out her phone, opened a browser, and typed 2 words into the search bar. Records request. Meanwhile, a few walls away, at his desk, Garrett leaned back in his chair and cracked open a soda. To him, this was just another clean stop, another quiet night. He pulled up the report form, typed out 12 minutes of pure fiction, and hit submit without a second thought. He did not review the dashcam footage. He did not review the recording from his chest camera. He didn't even notice that, the whole time, Naomi Cole had been looking directly into the lens on his chest. Not with fear, not with tears, but with the calm, measuring, calculating focus of someone who was not a victim at all. She was something else entirely. And right there, under the parking lot light, she had already begun building her case. Naomi Cole did not sleep that night. She sat at the kitchen table in her mother's house, on the edge of the town of Coleridge, a bag of frozen peas draped across her swollen wrists, and opened her laptop. The screen lit her face a pale, cold blue. Behind her, on shelves that ran the length of the wall, were books. Not novels. Law books. Thick, spines cracked, page edges worn soft from being turned too many times, organized by Federal Circuit. Her mother had dusted them that very morning. She always did, even though Naomi hadn't lived in this house in 20 years. And on the top shelf, half hidden behind the books, sat a small wooden box. Naomi did not open it. She never opened it in front of anyone. Remember that box. By the end of this story, you will know what is inside it. And when you do, I'd bet you'll want to go back to the beginning and watch all of this again with different eyes. The arrest report was already in the system. She found it in 11 minutes. 3 charges: resisting arrest, obstruction of justice, failure to comply with a lawful order. Every word of it fiction, every word written for one single purpose: to make her disappear quietly into a system built to forget people who look like her. She took a screenshot of the report, saved it, backed it up a second time. Then she opened a new tab and filed her first request. The first one, for all the footage from the dash cam in Patrol Unit 714 between 6:30 and 7:15 on the night of her arrest. She wanted Garrett's own car to tell the story of how it had driven on that road. The second, for the recording from Garrett's chest camera over the same window of time. She wanted his own voice. The third, and this is the one that shows she was playing a far larger game than a single traffic stop, for the records of every stop Wade Garrett had made over the last 3 years. She worked until 4 in the morning, methodical, quiet. It was the kind of quiet that, if you have ever seen someone do it, you never forget. The kind of quiet that does not mean peace. The kind of quiet that means a person is preparing. Her mother appeared in the kitchen doorway just as the sky began to lighten. Eleanor Underwood, 78 years old, still wearing the floral robe she'd had since Naomi was in law school. She looked at her daughter, looked at the laptop, looked at the bag of frozen peas. "You're not going to let this go, are you?" "No, Mama." Eleanor came closer, and for the first time, saw the bruises on her daughter's wrists in daylight. They had gone a deep purple now, almost black at the edges. She pressed her lips together, the way black mothers press their lips, the way of someone who has spent a lifetime swallowing rage so their children wouldn't have to. "I've watched this happen to your father," she said, "to your brother, to the men in my church, and every single time, somebody tells you to just let it go, to stay safe." "I'm past safe, Mama." Eleanor looked at her daughter for a long moment. Then she nodded, a small nod. "Then you do it all the way. Don't do it halfway." "I have never done anything halfway in my life, Mama." The records began arriving within a week. The dash cam footage came first. Naomi watched it at the kitchen table, volume all the way up. And here's the beautiful, chilling thing about it. The footage showed her car dead center in its lane, steady speed, turn signal at every curve, not one drift, not one swerve. And then, into the corner of the frame, came Garrett's own patrol car, shooting forward, crossing into the oncoming lane, cutting her off. Garrett's own camera had just proven his first lie, before he ever opened his mouth to defend it. Everything he had written in that report, from the very first line, collapsed. The body camera footage came 3 days later. Naomi watched it twice. The audio was crystal clear. Every word Garrett had said, dog, animal, nobody, and worse. All of it captured in high definition by the very equipment his own department had issued him. And here is the detail that made Naomi sit very still for a long time. It wasn't the words. It was his voice when he said them. Casual, almost bored, tired even. It was the voice of a man who had said these things so many times that they no longer felt like cruelty to him. To him, they were just routine, just the job. She saved every file, backed them up twice onto 2 separate drives, plus a copy in the cloud. Then she dug deeper. Garrett's personnel file was mostly redacted, but the complaint records weren't. Not entirely. 11 formal complaints in 14 years. And here is where your heart starts beating a little faster. Every single person who had filed one, without exception, was Black or Hispanic. And every single complaint had been dismissed by Internal Affairs with the exact same printed boilerplate sentence. Insufficient evidence to substantiate. Copy, paste, next. Copy, paste, next. Naomi sat back from the screen. Outside the window, the sky had begun to lighten, and she realized something that changed the whole nature of what she was doing. Garrett was not one bad apple. He was not a single rogue cop. Garrett was a system, working exactly the way it was designed to work. He hadn't just stopped the wrong woman. He had done precisely this, over and over for 14 years. And each time there had been a machine behind him, quietly filing a human being's pain into a drawer marked insufficient evidence. She hadn't found a case. She had found a pattern. Naomi pulled out a notebook and began writing names down, one at a time. And beside each name she left a blank space, because she was going to call every single one of them. Naomi started making calls, one name in the notebook at a time. The first picked up on the second ring, a young woman named Denise Carver, 23 years old. 2 years earlier, on that same Route 7, the same charges, word for word. Resisting, obstruction. She had tried to fight it, hired a court-appointed lawyer, and lost. In the end, she pleaded guilty to obstruction just to avoid jail. "Nobody believed me," Denise said. Her voice was still thin, even after all this time. "My word against his, and his word had a badge behind it. My lawyer told me fighting a cop's word was a waste of everybody's time." "How did that record affect you?" Naomi asked, pen already on the page. There was a silence on the other end. "I lost my job, failed a background check. I was a teaching assistant at an elementary school, first person in my whole family to work in a school." A shaky breath. "I lost it over something I never did." The second was a retired school teacher named Gerald Porter, 61 years old, a veteran. Garrett had stopped him 3 times in 18 months, every time on Route 7. The last time, he had made the man kneel on the shoulder of the road in the middle of passing traffic while he searched the car. "He made me get down on my knees," Gerald said, and his voice slowed. "I am a 60-year-old man, Miss Cole. I wore the uniform of this country once, and that man made me kneel on the asphalt, in front of people I see at church every Sunday. They drove by. They saw me." His hands shook as he told it. She couldn't see it through the phone, but she could hear it in the gaps in his voice. 18 months had gone by, and still, every time he told it, his hands shook. The third would not talk, too afraid. Said only that she just wanted to forget the whole thing. But the fourth talked. A woman named Tamara Bridges, 29, a single mother. Garrett had pulled her over with her 2 small children in the back seat. When she asked why she'd been stopped, he leaned into her window and said, "Shut your mouth, or I'll give those kids of yours something to cry about." "I never filed a complaint," Tamara said. "I never told anyone but my sister. What would have been the point? They protect their own. You only bring more trouble down on yourself and your kids." Naomi recorded each call, with their permission, transcribed every word. Then she cross-referenced each date against Garrett's shift logs, which she had also obtained through a separate request. Every timestamp matched, not one day off. Then she began to build the whole picture, a timeline, a spreadsheet, and a map of every stop Garrett had made in 3 years, each one a dot, color-coded by the race of the driver. The numbers told their own story. In 3 years, on the stretch of Route 7 between Coleridge and the county line, Garrett had made over 200 stops. and more than 9 out of 10 were black or Hispanic drivers. In a county that was nearly 2/3 white, Naomi spread the printouts across her mother's kitchen table like autopsy photos. Each sheet was a life interrupted, each case number a person who had once been called an animal, shoved into a hood, cuffed for breathing wrong, and then erased by a system that filed it all under insufficient evidence to substantiate. When she printed the map, Route 7 looked like a crime scene. The red dots clustered thick in a 10-mile corridor, where for 14 years, Wade Garrett had turned his patrol car into a weapon. She pulled the court records too. Of the cases where Garrett had arrested a person of color, most had ended in a plea deal. People took a lesser charge, a misdemeanor, to avoid the risk of going to trial against the word of a decorated officer. The system didn't even need to convict anyone. It only needed people too exhausted, too poor, and too afraid to fight. 5 cases had gone all the way to trial. Garrett won all 5. His testimony was never once challenged. His camera footage was never once requested. In 14 years, not one defense lawyer had ever thought to ask for that footage. Until Naomi Cole. She organized everything into a single file, tabbed, indexed, cross-referenced. It was the kind of preparation that does not come from a few searches online or from watching crime shows on television. It was the kind of preparation that only comes from years of reading case law the way other people read novels. Then she took a fresh sheet of paper and wrote 2 words at the top: represent myself. She would be her own lawyer, no attorney beside her, no team, just her, a courtroom, and the evidence Garrett had been kind enough to record on his own camera. And when she connected those names with lines, she saw the true shape of the thing she was up against. A line ran from each victim back to Garrett, from Garrett to the department, from the department to internal affairs, and from internal affairs back around to shield Garrett. A closed circle. A machine built to do one single thing: protect itself. And Naomi Cole was about to become the first person in 14 years to break that circle open. But that circle was not going to sit still and take it. Naomi filed her request for the 3 years of stop records on a Monday. By Friday, she got back a cold email from the department's records office. A portion of the data from the time period you requested has been corrupted by a system error and cannot be recovered. A system error in exactly the months with the most complaints. What a strange coincidence. That night, her phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. Just a few lines. You don't know me. I work in the department. They're cleaning up records tomorrow night. If you still need anything in there, get it now. Then the number vanished as if it had never existed. Naomi stared at the message for a long time. She would never know for certain who sent it. One of the deputies who had stood silent at the front desk that night. A records clerk who had seen enough. Someone, somewhere in that machine, who finally could not look away one more time. She didn't know, but she did not panic, because here is what the department had not counted on. In that very first week, the moment the dash and Bodycam footage came in, Naomi had downloaded it and backed it up onto 2 separate drives, plus a copy in the cloud. The thing they were scrambling to lose to a system error tomorrow night, she had held a clean copy of for days. They thought they were about to bury the evidence. In fact, they had just handed her a brand new crime: destruction of records. And that strange text? She screenshotted it, saved it. One day it too would be a piece of the picture. And then, the next morning, she made a move that would make any lawyer nod with respect. She filed an emergency motion with the court for an evidence preservation order, barring the department from destroying any record connected to Garrett. It was granted within 24 hours. The very door they were trying to slam shut, she had just jammed an iron bar into. The system had thrown its first punch, and it had just missed. Garrett got the court summons while he was eating lunch at his desk. He skimmed it, still chewing. Then he grinned and tossed the paper across the desk to his partner, Briggs. "You believe this? That woman from Route 7, she's suing, and she's representing herself. No lawyer, nothing." He shook his head, almost amused. "These people, I'm telling you, they never learn. You want me to call the union lawyer?"
Briggs said. Yeah, get Beckett. But honestly, Garrett crumpled his napkin, tossed it at the trash can, missed, and didn't bother to pick it up. This thing'll be over before lunch. That evening, he met Thomas Beckett, the police union's go-to attorney, at a bar called Donnie's. Beckett had reviewed the case file in 20 minutes. Open and shut, Beckett said, sipping his beer. She hasn't got 1 day of legal training. A defendant representing herself to a judge, that's about the same as a confession. We'll be out of there by noon. Garrett clinked his glass against Beckett's. That's what I told him. Then he said it again, that same favorite line. These people, they never learn. Same words, same tone, same lazy certainty. Like a man standing on a trap door, beer in hand, going on and on about the beautiful view from up high. And here's what made it perfect. In all the days leading up to the trial, Garrett did nothing. He did not review the dash cam footage. He did not review the chest camera recording. He never once checked who the woman he had stopped actually was. Why would he? In his mind, the thing was already won. He had won 5 before. He would win this one. He had no idea that a few miles away, in a kitchen, there was a woman who had watched the very footage he couldn't be bothered to open, over and over, until she knew every second of it by heart. But hold on, because right before everything turned, everything nearly fell apart. 3 days before the trial, Naomi's phone buzzed. A text from Tamra, the single mother. I'm sorry. I've thought about it so much. I can't testify. I have 2 little kids, and if this goes wrong, I'm the one who loses everything, not you. I want to, but I can't. I'll be praying for you. A witness had pulled out, and Naomi understood why. She didn't blame Tamra for a single second. That fear was real. It had been taught to her over and over with every stop, every dismissed complaint. Then the next night the phone rang again, an unknown number, a man's voice she didn't recognize, polite in a way that was cold. The voice didn't threaten her directly. It only advised that she might want to think very carefully before dragging a dedicated officer with 14 years of service into open court, that these things rarely ended well for the person who filed them, that a woman living with her elderly mother ought to think about keeping the peace. Then the line went dead, without a goodbye. This was the moment that system showed Naomi just how big it was. This was the same weight that had crushed Denise, that had made Gerald kneel, that had taught Tamra that silence was safer. And for one moment, standing in the dark kitchen, listening to the dial tone, even Naomi Cole felt it. The weight that wanted to tell her, stop, you can't beat this alone. And 2 days later, he stopped calling. He came in person. Naomi had just pushed a grocery cart out of a store when she saw him. Garrett, out of uniform, leaning against her car in the half-empty lot, arms folded. You're a smart woman, he said, his voice light, almost friendly, and it was that lightness that made it frightening. So, I'll talk to you like a smart woman. Do you have any idea what you're playing with? I have friends, at the department, at the courthouse, all over this county. You come after me, you're not just poking me. Naomi did not step back. She set her grocery bags in the trunk, closed it, and turned to look him dead in the eye. You're standing too close to my car, officer, and there's something you should know. The phone in my jacket pocket has been recording since the second I saw you standing there. But just a moment, just one. The confidence drained out of his face. Then he sneered, pushed himself off her car. You've got nothing. But he said it a little too fast, and he walked away a little too quickly. Here's the part you need to see. Naomi stood there, in the empty lot, until the sound of his engine had completely faded, and then her hands began to shake. She is not a statue. She was afraid. She is human. A man with a gun, a badge, and friends all over the county had come to find her in person to frighten her. Anyone would be afraid. But she did not delete the recording. She saved it, made 2 copies, exactly as she had with everything else. Being afraid is one thing. Giving up is something else entirely. And Naomi Cole had never once let the first become the second. Her mother found her that night, ironing the one decent blazer she owned. On the dining table, 6 folders sat in a neat row, in the exact order she planned to present them in court. Somebody called you, didn't they? Eleanor asked. A mother always knows. Yes. Are you scared? Naomi set the iron down. Yes, Mama. I'm scared. She looked up.
But I'm more scared of the version where I give up, and then 10 years from now there's another Denise, another Gerald, another Tamara standing on the side of that road. I'm not as scared as that. Eleanor came over, took her daughter's hand, turned it palm up, and laid a thin gold chain into it. For luck, she said. Naomi looked at the chain. You know I don't believe in luck, Mama. Then what do you believe in, daughter? Naomi closed her hand around it. I believe in preparation. Thursday morning, courtroom 4B, Colton County Courthouse. Naomi arrived 45 minutes early. The room smelled of old wood and floor polish. The kind of room that hadn't been renovated since the 80s. Low ceiling, fluorescent lights humming at a frequency just below hearing. A flag hung limp in the corner. She chose the defense table on the left, the one closer to the empty jury box, even though there would be no jury today. This was a bench trial, just the judge, the evidence, and her. She set the worn leather briefcase on the table, unclasped it with both hands, and took out 6 folders, laying them in a straight row, each one labeled, each one numbered. No lawyer sat beside her, no paralegal, no expensive stack of binders, just her, an old leather briefcase, and 6 paper folders. And she was ready. The gallery filled slowly. A few of Garrett's colleagues came in from the department, 3 deputies in plain clothes, sitting in the back row, arms crossed, legs stretched out, there to watch a show. They expected a short one. Denise Carver sat in the 3rd row, hands clenched in her lap, knuckles white. Gerald Porter sat beside her, in the navy suit he'd worn to his retirement dinner, a little tight in the shoulders now. Tamara Bridges did not come, but that morning she had sent Naomi a text. I can't be there, but I'm praying for you. At 8:45, the other side walked in. Thomas Beckett came first. Gray suit, burgundy tie, a leather briefcase that probably cost more than Denise's car payment. He moved with the easy confidence of a man who had won cases in rooms like this for 30 years. Behind him came Garrett, and Garrett was in full dress uniform. His badge polished to a mirror, every crease pressed sharp enough to cut. It was a deliberate choice, every detail of it. Walk in looking like the law itself. Walk in looking untouchable. He scanned the room, and his eyes found Naomi at the defense table. Alone. No lawyer beside her, no paralegal, no towering stacks of files. Just a middle-aged black woman with a worn briefcase and 6 paper folders. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, something worse than a smile. The complete absence of concern. The look of a man shrugging at a contest whose score he believed had been settled in advance. He leaned over and whispered something to Beckett. Beckett glanced at Naomi, gave a short nod, and adjusted his cufflinks. They sat down at the table like 2 men settling into recliners for a game they already knew the score of. All rise. The Honorable Judge Patricia Caldwell presiding. Caldwell came in from the side door, mid-60s, silver hair pulled back tight, reading glasses on a beaded chain around her neck. She moved with the deliberate pace of a woman who had spent decades weighing the weight of every word before allowing it into a room. She sat, adjusted her glasses, and opened the case file. Case number, she read. Then the charges. The state versus Naomi Cole. Resisting arrest, obstruction of justice, and failure to comply with a lawful order. She looked up over the rim of her glasses. Miss Cole, the record says you have elected to represent yourself. Are you certain about that? The court can give you time to find an attorney. I'm certain, Your Honor. Thank you. Then this is your hearing. Please proceed. Naomi stood. She carried no notes. She didn't need them. She had it all by heart. She laid one hand lightly on the first folder. Your Honor, the first charge against me is that I was driving erratically, and that this was the lawful basis for the stop. I would like to present the footage from Deputy Garrett's own dash camera, recorded during the exact window of the incident. A clerk played the footage on the courtroom monitor, and everyone in the room saw one very simple thing. Naomi's car, dead center in its lane, steady speed, turn signal at every curve. Not one drift, not one swerve, and then, racing into frame from behind, Garrett's own patrol car, pulling out, crossing into the oncoming lane, and cutting her off. Garrett's own camera had just proven his first lie. in front of the judge, before he had even opened his mouth to say a word in his own defense.
His half-smile still did not move. He still believed this was a small detail, because he still did not know what was in the other 5 folders on that table.
The second charge, Naomi said, her voice still level as still water, is that I resisted and failed to comply. So that the court understands what actually happened, I would like to present the recording from Deputy Garrett's own chest camera. Judge Caldwell nodded. And then the whole courtroom heard it. Not Naomi's account, not a retelling. Garrett's own voice, coming through the speakers, crystal clear, recorded by his own department in high definition. Get out of the vehicle. People like you don't get to ask questions. You're nothing. Just one more nobody I'll forget by morning. And then the voice went on, casual, bored. I don't care what junkie gave birth to you. And here is where the irony turns almost cruel. That night on the road, when Naomi reminded him he was being recorded, Garrett had laughed and said the camera on his chest only recorded what he wanted it to. He was wrong. That kind of camera automatically uploads to a central server at the end of every shift, and once it is up there, no deputy has the power to delete it. For 14 years, Garrett believed the camera belonged to him. It turned out, from start to finish, it was the witness against him. A silence fell over the courtroom, the thick, heavy kind. The 3 deputies in the back row stopped stretching their legs. One of them slowly took his eyes off Garrett and looked down at the floor. In the 3rd row, Denise raised a hand to her mouth, and on Garrett's face, the smile, finally, went out. Beckett shot to his feet. Your Honor, the language here, while unfortunate, is not relevant to the charges. It is relevant to whether any lawful basis for this stop and arrest ever existed, Naomi answered, not raising her voice. And I am not finished, Your Honor. Continue, Miss Cole, said Caldwell. Naomi called her first witness. Denise Carver took the stand. Her hands shook, but her voice did not. She told the court about her own stop 2 years before, about being pressured to plead guilty, about the record that cost her the background check, and the first teaching job anyone in her family had ever held. I lost it, she said, looking straight at the judge, over something I never did. Then came Gerald Porter. He rose from the bench in his slightly tight suit, walked to the stand, and told the court about the night he was made to kneel on the shoulder of the road. I served this country, he said, both hands resting on the rail of the stand to keep them from shaking. And that man made me kneel on the asphalt, in front of my neighbors, like I wasn't a human being. When Gerald stepped down, Beckett stood, some of the smoothness back in his voice. Your Honor, 2 witnesses, from years ago. That is all the defendant has. 2 old stories and a collection of paperwork. And for a moment, it seemed his words carried weight. Judge Caldwell frowned, tapped her pen lightly on the bench. Miss Cole, the court has given you a good deal of latitude. If this is all you have, then— She didn't finish the sentence, because the doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. Every head turned, and in the doorway stood a young woman, out of breath, as if she had just run, one hand still gripping the strap of a purse. Tamara Bridges, the single mother who had texted to say she couldn't come, the one who had been too afraid to testify.
I'm sorry I'm late,
Tamara said, her voice trembling but never stopping. I sat in my car out in that parking lot for 45 minutes. I kept thinking about my 2 kids. And then I realized that's exactly the reason I have to walk in here. Caldwell looked at her a moment, then set down her pen. The witness may take the stand. Tamara told the court about the night her car was stopped with her 2 children asleep in the back, about what Garrett said. Shut your mouth, or I'll give those kids something to cry about. She told it in a voice that broke in a few places, but she told all of it, word for word. And when she was done, the latitude Judge Caldwell had been about to close was wide open again, wider than ever. Beckett did not stand back up. Then Naomi did something that made the whole courtroom hold its breath. Your Honor, I would like to call Deputy Garrett himself to the stand. Beckett leaned in close to his client, whispering fast. But it was too late. Garrett was already standing. Of course he was standing. In 14 years, not one person had ever dared to challenge his word. In his mind, this was not a trap. This was a chance to set things straight, to remind this room who wore the badge.
He walked to the stand with a little of the old swagger still in him. It was the last mistake he would make. Naomi did not shout. She did not accuse. She only asked. Calmly, one question at a time, like a skilled bricklayer setting one brick, then the next. In your report, you wrote that I was driving erratically. Do you still stand behind that? I do. The court just watched the dash footage from your own car. In that footage, did you see any vehicle driving erratically, officer? Silence. Let me ask again. In the footage from your own camera, who was it that crossed into the oncoming lane and cut off another vehicle? Garrett's jaw worked. The situation, it was complicated. You also wrote that I resisted. The court just heard the entire audio. At what second in it did I resist? Or did I only ask for your badge number? You had an attitude with me. An attitude. Naomi let that hang in the air a beat. That is the charge you entered into an official law enforcement record, officer. The crime of having an attitude. And this is the moment the mask slid off his face. He leaned forward on the stand, and the voice from the road that night came back, right there in the courtroom, right in front of the judge. Who do you think you are? I kept that road clean for 14 years, while people like... He stopped. But it was too late. The whole room had just heard the words, people like. And not one person in that courtroom needed him to finish it. Please, finish your sentence, officer, Naomi said, very softly. People like what? Garrett sat there, his chest heaving, and for the first time in his entire career, he could not find a single safe answer. The man who had decided who was allowed to speak on his road could no longer control his own mouth. And everyone in the room had just seen who he really was. Not through a recording from weeks ago. In the flesh, live, right in front of them. Naomi let the silence stretch one more beat. Then she said, "No further questions, Your Honor." Beckett rose one last time, desperately, and this time, every trace of the easy confidence was gone from his voice. He reached for his final weapon. Your Honor, all of this is beside the point. And as for the defendant herself, there is nothing to prove she is who she claims to be. The military dog tag she wears, anyone can buy those online these days. Impersonating a service member is a crime. This whole thing, 4 people arriving on cue, the witnesses, may well be an elaborately staged production. Yes, Naomi cut in. And for the first time all morning she raised her voice, not a shout, just a new weight in every word. Let's talk about who I am. She opened the last folder, the one Garrett had never known existed. My name is Naomi Cole. I hold the rank of Major in the United States Army. I am an attorney with the Judge Advocate General's Corps. For the last 12 years, my daily job has been reading exactly the kind of case file you see on this table. That is why I do not need a lawyer sitting beside me today. I have sat on the other side of rooms like this one 100 times. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Beckett sat down, slower than he had stood. And there is one more thing, Naomi went on. Since opposing counsel just referred to my dog tags and called them something I bought online. She reached into the old leather briefcase and took out the small wooden box. The box that, all through this story, she had never opened in front of anyone. She set it on the table and opened the lid. 8 years ago, on the other side of the world from this courtroom, my unit's convoy was ambushed. One of the vehicles was hit and caught fire. There were 3 soldiers trapped inside who could not get out on their own. Her voice dropped, but in the silence of the courtroom, every word was clear. I went back into that burning vehicle. Twice. I carried each of them out, one at a time. The last one, I pulled clear a few seconds before the fuel tank went up. She lifted a medal out of the box and set it down on the table under the light. This is the Silver Star. It is the 3rd highest decoration this country awards for valor in the face of the enemy. And the dog tags that counsel says I bought online, they are mine. I bled for them. I still carry shrapnel in my body to this day. She turned, and for the first time since that night on the road, she looked Wade Garrett dead in the eye. On Route 7, you called me nothing. You said I was just one more nobody on your road. You said someone like me would have to steal a set of tags like these. And you just repeated it, in this courtroom, through your lawyer, about an officer decorated for running into fire to save 3 lives. She closed the wooden box.
You did not stop one more nobody on your road, officer. You stopped the wrong person, and I gave you a chance that very night to find out who you had stopped. I told you to read my name into the system, just once. Do you remember?
Garrett sat there, in his pressed dress uniform, beneath his polished badge. And he could not say a single word.
The courtroom was silent as a held breath. In the back row, the 3 deputies who had come to watch a quick show sat frozen, none of them able to look at one another. In the 3rd row, Gerald Porter slowly rose to his feet. He said nothing. He just stood at attention, spine straight, the way one old soldier salutes another. Then Denise stood up beside him, then Tamara. Then, one by one, the rest of the gallery, in silence.
The silver star lay there on the table, under the old fluorescent light of a small-town courtroom. And next to it, in his finest uniform, sat the man who had called its owner nothing. Judge Caldwell looked down at the 2 of them. She did not need to say anything. The room had already said it all. Judge Patricia Caldwell slowly took off her reading glasses. She looked at Garrett for a long moment. Then she looked down at the arrest report, the 12 minutes of fiction he had typed up on a quiet night, without a second thought.
All charges against Miss Cole, she announced, are dismissed immediately, with a finding that this stop and this arrest had no lawful basis from the very beginning. But Judge Caldwell did not stop there, and this is the part that made the whole room hold still. This court cannot ignore what has been presented here today. She looked straight down at Garrett. The recordings, the witness testimony, and the years-long pattern in this record go far beyond a traffic hearing. I am referring all of this evidence to federal prosecutors with a request that they open a civil rights investigation. And then everything came down as fast as a line of dominoes that had taken 14 years to set up. Thomas Beckett, the union lawyer who had called the case open and shut out by noon, quietly stepped away from the union's legal team exactly 3 weeks later. No public statement. His professional profile was updated within the week. Private practice, personal injury. Briggs and the 3 deputies who had seen it chuckled at it, bowed their heads at the front desk that night, and said nothing. Each handed in their resignation before the investigation could even reach their desks. The federal investigation turned up things that reached well beyond Naomi's case. With the footage and the map brought into the light, the 5 cases Garrett had once won began to come apart. Denise Carver's old conviction, the one that had cost her a job, was overturned and wiped from her record. The young woman who had once been told that fighting a cop's word was a waste of time was now declared innocent by that same court. And the person who had texted Naomi that warning in the night, the nameless insider, she never traced who it was. But among the 4 deputies who resigned, there was one, the youngest, the one who had stood at the front desk that night and bowed his head over his paperwork instead of speaking up. Before he left, he submitted a sworn statement detailing everything he had witnessed in 3 years of working alongside Garrett. Maybe it was him, maybe not. Sometimes a person steps toward the light without ever needing anyone to know their name. And 4 months later, Garrett was sentenced. 18 months in a federal facility. A permanent ban from law enforcement. No pension, no badge, no power left at all. He walked into the sentencing in a borrowed gray suit. No dress uniform, no polished shield, no mirrored sunglasses. Just a man in someone else's clothes, facing the consequences of 14 years of cruelty. The judge who sentenced him was not Naomi Cole. She did not need to be in that room. She had already said everything that needed to be said. And the Colton County Sheriff's Department began to change, this time for real. Mandatory body camera activation, regular bias audits, a civilian review board made up of the people of the county, the first in this place's history, and a new required training module for every deputy titled Constitutional Policing and the Cost of Abuse. The first slide of that course was a photograph of the stretch of Route 7, the very road where Garrett had spent 14 years believing the rules did not apply to him, and the people that closed circle had once crushed. Gerald Porter began volunteering at the county courthouse. He sat in the gallery during traffic cases, not as a witness, not as a protester, just as a presence. A man in a clean suit sitting in the third row quietly watching, making sure no one was ever made to kneel on the shoulder of a road again. Tamara Bridges, the mother who had been too afraid to testify, enrolled in a paralegal course. 2 evenings a week while her sister watched the kids. She told Naomi she wanted to help people like herself. People who didn't know they had rights until someone showed them. On Route 7, the stretch between Coleridge and the county line, traffic still flows the way it always has. Pine trees, 2 lanes, copper light. In the evening, the speed limit is still 55. But the stops have changed. The number of them has dropped sharply. And somewhere, in a quiet office, Major Naomi Cole went back to her own work, reading files, signing orders, doing the things she has always done, making sure that power answers to something stronger than itself: the truth. Here is what stays with me after a story like this. For one dark stretch of road, a woman stood there, her hands wrenched behind her back, listening to a stranger call her nothing. And that stranger, in the half second it took to look at her face, was certain he knew the whole story of who she was. One more nobody on his road, that was it. He was wrong, catastrophically wrong. And honestly, he is not so different from most of us. Because here is the thing worth carrying out of this story. A badge, an appearance, a prejudice can give a person the feeling that they already know who you are. But that feeling is almost always wrong. The tired woman in line ahead of you, the quiet man at the back of the room, the one you finished sizing up in a single glance. You never truly know who you are standing in front of, and the very least, the smallest thing any of us can do is look twice before we open our mouths. Naomi Cole did not bring down the man who humiliated her with a raised voice. She didn't need to. She brought him down with patience, with preparation, and with the very words he had recorded with his own hand, on his own camera. Because here is the truth men like Garrett never understand. Power knows how to shout, but the truth does not need to shout. The truth only needs one person steady enough to build it, and to set it down on the table. If you take only one thing away from this story, let it be this. The person you just glanced at and quietly wrote off as a nobody may be the strongest, the bravest person in the entire room. You just haven't looked long enough to see it. A badge, a title, an appearance can give a person the right to judge you, but it never gives them the right to be right. And the truth, however quietly it speaks, in the end is always stronger than power that knows how to shout. Never let a half-second glance decide how you treat a human being. That is the lesson Wade Garrett paid his whole career to learn. I hope you learn it without having to pay that price. So here's the question I want to leave you with. Have you ever been judged before anyone knew who you really were? Have you ever been looked down on, brushed aside, treated like a nobody, and then proven every single one of them wrong? Tell me in the comments. I truly want to hear your story. If this story reached you the way it reached me, leave a like so it can find one more person who needs to hear it today. Share it with someone you know who is being underestimated. And, if you haven't already, subscribe. Because stories like this one, they don't tell themselves. And one last thing. The part that truly keeps me up at night, even after telling this whole story, it isn't the cop. Garrett paid for what he did. It's the 3 cars. The 3 cars that slowed down to look at a woman in handcuffs on the side of the road in the dark, and then all 3 of them just drove on. Not one stopped. Not one rolled down a window. Not one pulled out a phone to record. Think about that. What if the woman on the side of that road had been your mother, your sister, your daughter, and 3 cars just drove past? That is the part I can't sleep over, not the cruel man, the decent people who chose to look away. The next time you see someone on the side of the road of this life, looked down on, pushed around, treated like a nobody, I hope you will be the car that stops. And if you think today's story was intense, wait until the next one. An old veteran, a whole town treated as invisible for 40 years, until the morning 3 black cars turned down the little road in front of his house, and the whole town finally learned who he had been all along. I'll see you in that one.